There's not a day goes by I don't feel regret. Not because I'm in here, or because you think I should. I look back at the way I was, a young, stupid kid who committed that terrible crime. I want to talk to him. I want to try and talk some sense to him. Tell him the way things are. But I can't. That kid was thrown into a large wicker man and burned to death, screaming about the bees. That's what I've got to live with. Rehab? It's just a bullshit word. So you can go and stamp your form, Sonny, and stop wasting my time. Because in truth, to tell you the truth, I don't give a goddamn bee. Welcome to the Fluffenhammer. Roll the music!
Every man lives. Not every man truly dies. Rock! Let's get out of here!
Guns might be that way. Let's go the other way.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, you have held on to the kite that has brought you over the abyss known as the Fluffenhammer. Stare straight down. Stare clearly through, for the abyss stares back, probably with a nice knowing little wink, and says, "Hello, welcome aboard. I'm Adam, I'm Gruffy, and I'm here to hold your hand through this carnival of carnage, as we do so every week. But I am not alone this night. Oh no, for with me is a special guest to talk about, I'm fairly convinced, a bit of Kim Newman at some point. That's going to be my bet. Hello, Anna. How are you doing this evening?
Hello, Adam. I'm doing very well, and I would just like to say that was such a wonderful mashup of my two favorite movies. I was not expecting it, and yeah, true storyteller right there.
I always like doing it because it puts people into this position of just going, "What the hell is happening? What is this?"
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether I was allowed to interject at several points because I definitely wanted to, mostly with giggles. But yeah, very good, very good. I feel under considerable pressure now.
Oh, don't worry. There's I had Alex from Grimdark magazine on a couple of months ago. We were talking. One of the things he kind of looked at me after, just going, "But we've just spent 45 minutes talking about World War II. We haven't talked about anything but World War II. Is this actually interesting for anyone?" I don't care. It's interesting to me. So don't feel like you're under any pressure.
You're in control, so yeah.
That gives the idea I have any kind of control over my own brain. That's unlikely. That's like trying to herd a field full of cats to go into one direction. That's not how my brain works. Okay. But anyhow, how are you doing this evening, Anna? Anyhow,
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, we are in the beginnings of Storm Agnes.
Yes.
The wind and the rain are lashing on my window at the moment, but I'm sure it's probably a little bit worse for you because you are considerably further north than I am.
I mean, for coming back earlier on today and just watching as things were starting to really pick up speed and going, that doesn't bode well for my internet connection whatsoever. Oh, yeah. No. Oh, yeah. No.
If in doubt, blame Aggie.
Right, yeah, I heard somebody talking about Storm Magnus earlier on today, and I'm sure that they said Storm Magnus, and I was like, well, that's just an amazing name. I want to experience Storm Magnus.
Unfortunately not. No. Although it does remind me of Agnes Nitt from the... So... Yeah.
Oh, the wonderful Agnes Nitt stroke Perdurta Extreme, yeah?
That's her.
Oh no, if we get onto the Pratchett topic, we'll be here for days. I will warn you now.
We'll never get back off again.
No, I'm a severe. I'm a very much a Nigel. I am stuck with Pratchett being one of the tentpoles of my personality. I think. Yeah, it's.
I think there are worse personality traits to have than a love of history.
Oh, absolutely. It's as I keep trying to explain to my wife. they're not just funny books. They are studies in morality. They are studies in humanity. There's a hell of a lot going on under the surface of these things. And
absolutely. Every time I buy a cheap alternative to something, I always think, yeah, that's the Sam Vimes boots theory in action. Yes, again.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that the Sam Boots index is now a thing, it goes to show how far Pratchett's spread,
Yeah.
I
think it's because he made stuff like that so accessible and so understandable.
Absolutely.
And the fact that poor people do spend more money than rich people on the same stuff because they do buy the cheap versions of everything because they have to buy the cheap versions of everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got the people saying, just, cancel your Netflix subscription. It's a little bit harder than that, actually.
Yes, if you cancelled your Netflix subscription, didn't go to Costa, and stopped buying aubergines, I think it is now. That's the current one. It would only take you 643 years to build up the money for a house deposit. So,
I mean, that seems perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, as a as an immortal, it's the only way to really go. I've spent
take time with it.
Yeah, half a millennium just sitting around, just waiting to be able to buy. But these are the aubergines that give me my immortality. Oh no!
God damn you, rich people!
God damn you, monkey paw! How must you give me such a painful curse? Don't know how we got here. So Anna, to try and bring things back onto some form of parallel track, who are you? Is the main question, I think, to kick things off with. I mean, I could sit here and say, Anna, being one of my favourite authors, it is an absolute privilege to sit here, and I'm going to do my very best not to fangirl like you. I make no promises, but but we'll get to that later on. As I start sitting here going, but who are you, and what's the journey that's brought you to this unfortunate situation where you're now having to talk to me?
This absolute pinnacle of my career so far. My name is Anna Stevens, and I am an author of epic fantasy in my own IP. So I have 2 trilogies out. The Gobline trilogy was my debut trilogy. First book, Gobline, came out in 2017. My second trilogy is The Songs of the Drowned. The first 2 books are out, and the third book is out on the 7th of December this year. Okay. I also write for Black Library in Age of Sigmar and Warhammer Horror. And I also write for Marvel Comics in their prose fiction tie-in novels. So that's who I am. How did I get here? You emailed me out of the blue and started harassing me until I agreed to come on the show. You didn't. He didn't, dear listeners. He did not harass me at all. He was extremely polite.
The various unforetold animals that I've been sending you was enough to sweeten the deal. But
yes. Yeah, definitely. The tribute that you have paid me has finally tipped the balance.
This isn't a Minotaur. A Minotaur is a man with a bull's head. This is a bull with a man's head, and it won't stop telling me about taxes. The less interesting form of mythology. I mean, I came to your work with Gothgul Hollow, which was a book that I will not mince words, absolutely blew me away.
Oh, thank you.
It was as its whole, it is an incredible piece of work, and anybody who has listened to the show or read my articles or my book reviews or anything like that, I have waxed lyrical about Gothgul Hollow pretty much continuously for 2 years now.
Oh, wow.
To the point where my Discord, the Fluffenhammer Discord, now have a little group of people who know. And when people don't know, they just start sending like pictures of Gothgul Hollow and say, once you've read it, you'll know.
Yeah. So you're telling me that I have a small cabal of acolytes somewhere on the internet.
To carry on the Pratchettism, the Brethren of the Evil Night, we're kind of about 3 steps away from being that. Some brother doorkeeper any minute now is going to ask, depths the mighty whale does dream. I don't remember how algebra, the 3-field crop rotation works, but I remember single lines like that from Pratchett. That's concerning. So yeah, I mean, David, who's one of the guys who runs the Discord for me, he was interested in reading Gothgul Hollow, and I said to him, I can't talk to you about it until you've read it. Once you've read it, we'll have a whole conversation. And he read it, and apparently he finished the book, put the book down, picked up his phone, and screamed, "Wah!" and basically exploded with joy at me, which sounds less sticky than it actually was. But we'll get to that with some spoilers later on. The reason I wanted to bring that is that got me aware of your work, because it is a stunning piece of work. And it then got me into reading the Godblind trilogy, which is actually better than Gothgul Hollow. Because it's a massive, great big thing. That's what to say. Gothgul Hollow isn't something that I hold very dear to my heart, but I really liked the Godblind trilogy. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. It reminded me a lot of Patrick Rothfuss. No, I've got the poor guy's name wrong.
Rothfuss?
Rothfuss, yeah. I can't pronounce it. I can't speak. It's not very good for somebody who speaks on the radio. Yeah, In the Name of the Wind books. It had a lot of feelings of that, which I really enjoyed. I promise you, I'm not going to just tell you how much I like your work for the next hour.
No, that's fine. Carry on.
Thank you. But they're the two very different types of work. Both of them have a grimdark heart to them, but they work in very different ways. And I think it's really nice to come across work which you don't know what you're going to get from picking it up. There's a lot of, especially in the fantasy genre, I've really gone off on a tangent here, I do apologize. There's a lot of the same kind of work being done again and again and again and again. And it's one of the reasons why heroic fantasy for me has a tendency to get a little bit samey. So to read something which was a real breath of fresh air, like the Godblind trilogy was, I thought was just great. So my recommendation is go read the Godblind trilogy.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting you saying about the In the Name of the Wind. It reminded you of that because I've never read Patrick Rothfuss's work.
No.
So I've got no idea what you're talking about, but I know that he's very rich and famous, and I would like to be rich and famous. So it's a very nice comparison to have made. Thank you.
It's a comparison of the themes and the emotions that stir up within it, rather than the stories are similar, because the stories are not similar in any way, shape, or form. But it brought up a lot of those comforting. This is going to sound so weird for anyone who isn't me. Comforting Sunday evening feelings for me. Granted, my Sunday evenings were spent reading Dracula or Kim Newman or various 1960s horror like The Devil Rides Out.
I mean, I don't think anyone has ever referred to the Goblin trilogy as comforting before. So this is a podcast of many revelations already. We're only 15 minutes in, so this is wonderful.
I'm not a normal person. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But yeah, that's what I mean when I say comforting Sunday evening, because I would spend, especially during winter weekends, just devouring quite a lot of stuff. So, it could be anything from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein to The Steeless Stale Rat. And, there was something when I was reading, especially the second book for some reason, I've got this real feeling of, this is weird. I'm not 13. Huh. Right? So it took me back to, even though I'd not read it until then, this is the first time I'd read it, it took me back to feeling like that when I was 13, 14. It was a really interesting, quite a pleasant experience.
Wow, that's amazing.
But that's me fangirling, so I'm going to pull it back a bit. So where did it begin? What got you into the writing bug? How did you... Because I know as somebody who has so much creativity sloshing around in them that they sometimes make weird sloshing noises as they walk, it's very hard to kind of focus in on one thing just to get things rolling. So where does it begin?
Yeah.
How did you get started?
I mean, I've always been a big avid reader.
Mm-hmm.
When me and my sister were kids, our parents would take us to the library every Saturday morning, check out like as many books as you could, which back then was like 6 or something, read them all through the week, and then take them all back the next Saturday, get the next 6 out. And so stories and storytelling and books have always been hugely important and like a massive influence on me and on how I see the world and all that kind of stuff. So literature, from popular literature to classics to literature and all that kind of stuff, has always been something that I've been really interested in. And then I was always, probably as a result of the sheer amount of reading that I did, I was very good at English at school. I had a couple of teachers who really encouraged my creative writing side, which, sort of gave me that first kind of impetus to think, could this be, so, I love telling stories. Could this be something that I could do? I was never going to, I didn't do drama at school or anything like that. That wasn't the sort of storytelling I was interested in. I wanted to just shove a book at someone and run away and hide somewhere rather than, perform. Mm-hmm. So I always, I was always reading. I've never really stopped being an avid reader. And then I started, writing as a lot of teenagers do. I started writing some quite bad poetry and, lots of histrionics and as many metaphors as you can get in a, in a stanza as possible, all that kind of business.
Somewhere at my dad's house, there is a leather-bound journal. Oh yeah, where I tried to mimic Edgar Allan Poe and H.P. Lovecraft.
Wow.
What needs to happen to that book is it needs to be found and burnt for all purposes, because whew, if you can imagine a 16-year-old trying to get that melodramatic feel of Poe and marry it to Lovecraft's "I'm writing this as I go mad. There's things on the stairs." You can imagine the level of terrible that it is.
Yeah, I think melodrama is not something that most 16-year-olds need to try hard to reach. So when they're actually working for it, it probably goes so far out the other side into like I don't know, hyperdrama or something.
I think you end up with a Korean soap, is what you get. And if that's a joke that no one's going to get. Anybody watch any Korean soaps out there? Let me know, because they are the most melodramatic thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, so then, sort of pretty much from, I would say, early teenage onwards, I was writing various sorts of stories. And then I had the idea for Godblind years and years ago now. It actually took 13 years from first draft to publication. So most authors will tell you that they write a novel, realize it's rubbish, trunk it, write another novel, it's a little bit better but still rubbish, trunk it, and keep going until they write a good one, and that's the one that gets them a publishing deal. I did not do that. I wrote the first draft of Godblind, and then I sent it off to a bunch of agents. Oh my God. Oh, I cringe remembering that. Obviously, it was wisely and roundly rejected by everyone. And then instead of just sticking it in a drawer and writing something different, I rewrote the same book. Mm-hmm. And so that 13-year period between first draft and publication, I probably rewrote that book at least 13 times. Mm-hmm. I just rewrote it and then put it away, went off and did something else for a few months, came back, reread it, went, oh my God, that's terrible. Rewrote the entire book again. Wow. And so I sort of taught myself to write by rewriting the same story over and over again. But every time I rewrote it, something about it would change. Yeah. So that first draft, the first draft of that of Godblind is genuinely hilarious to me now when I think about it, because it was a classic high fantasy. Mm-hmm. So I mean, you and nearly everyone refers to Godblind as grimdark. So if you try and think of all those characters and you put them in a classic high fantasy world, was where it started out.
I can't see it.
No, it was bad. It was so bad. But I think what was happening was every time I rewrote it, I was a little bit older, a little bit wiser, a little bit more aware of the world. I'd read a little bit more widely. Things were happening in society, like 9/11, all of this, stuff was happening around the world, the, Iraq war, the Afghanistan, all of that kind of stuff. And it all sort of influenced me a little bit at a time. Yeah. And that is how we ended up going from a classic high fantasy to a grimdark trilogy over that period of time, was because I think as well, high fantasy was what I'd grown up reading an awful lot of, because it was mostly the only thing out there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then,
Remedy Feist and
Dragon Riders of Pern and the Deed of Paxenarian and obviously the Lord of the Rings and
the Dragonlance novels.
Never read those.
No,
I have not read those, but I know a lot of people who have. And then I started reading other stuff, and all of a sudden I was like, okay, so you don't have to tell a story in this way. Mm-hmm. And actually, like, the bad guys can be good and the good guys can do really terrible things, and that's actually an acceptable way of telling stories. And all of those things were just kept constantly sort of bubbling away in my subconscious. And then every time I redrafted what became Godblind, it was slightly more morally grey, and the characters were a little bit more edgy, and the bad things weren't just happening to the bad people, and etc. And then I finally got to a point, and I was like, this is actually quite good, and I sent it out on submission again. I think I did 3 more rounds of submissions, and it got rejected, but it was getting better rejections. Mm-hmm. So it was getting, there's definite promise, but I don't think you're there yet, kind of rejections, which obviously just spurred me on to rewrite it yet again and make it better. And then finally, I was on Twitter one day, and my now agent, I followed every agent I could come across. Yep. And he said that he was open to submissions, and he said, I'm looking for blah, 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 this kind of ballpark sort of story. And I think he mentioned Joe Abercrombie as a comparison. Okay, so I just replied to him and I said, I'm definitely not Joe Abercrombie, but I might be somewhere in the same ballpark. And he says, yeah, sure, send it through. So, and that the rest is history, as they say.
That's amazing.
So yeah, a long road, but a very good road in the end.
Mm-hmm. That's it. The important thing to remember is always that it's not the destination that's the important part. The destination is just showing you where you're going to go next. The journey to get to the destination, that's the important bit, because that's where you learn.
Yeah, and if I hadn't have spent all of those years rewriting that book, I wouldn't be the storyteller that I am now.
No.
I mean, I did, obviously, the fact that it took me 13 years to write the first book, and then I had 9 months to write the second, was a bit of a culture shock.
Ooh,
we were put on a book a year schedule, but you don't actually have a year to write it, because it has to go to production and editing, and it has to be physically made into a book and everything. So yeah, that was a shock. That was a steep learning curve of a whole different type, because that was, how quickly can you write a novel and make it coherent and make it not suffer from second book syndrome and set up the final book for a satisfying conclusion and hit your deadlines. And
weirdly enough, because you said that you'd rewritten it so many times, I was thinking that you had the trilogy rewritten every time.
No, just the first book.
God.
I didn't even know how that trilogy was going to end. I mean, no, I knew what was going to happen to about 3 characters. I had no idea what else was going to happen. Not a clue.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. Wow.
Someone became king who was never supposed to become king. Someone changed gender from draft number 10 to draft number 13. Madness.
Well, the thing is that you're only chronicling these people. They have lives of their own, and they will tell you exactly what they want to do.
That is exactly how it works with me.
That's my co-host George, who I was really hoping was going to be here today, because he's a published author in the horror genre. Does a lot of self-published horror. And one of the things that always happens in his books is, that the characters are living their own lives, and then George happens to them. So there was a life before George, and then George writes his story, and George happens to them.
Puts them through hell.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. In some of the nicest and most lovely ways, they get the worst things happen to them. And I think it's one of those things when a character takes a life of its own and informs you of where that character is going to go. That's when you've got the character down. That's a character now. It's no longer a concept.
Now, that is 100% what happened in the Goblin trilogy with the female soldier, Tara Carter. She was, so for a start off, she was a man. And then I was like, no, this isn't work. Something about this isn't working. Made her a woman. And all of a sudden that fell into place. And then as soon as I did that, she went from being a cameo who was supposed to have about 20 pages throughout the whole first book to, by the end of the trilogy, being an absolutely major component
big time. Nice.
Of all of the plots throughout all 3 books, and being one of the greatest heroes, but also one of just the most ordinary people, I think. You know, she wasn't like, hey, I'm a big hero. She was like, oh, fucking hell, I'm going to get my ass shot. But she was, you know, and according to a lot of readers, you know, she's become one of their most beloved characters, which is very gratifying. And people still threaten me with violence because of what happened to her in the third book. But, you know.
Well, I suppose if they're
story.
If you're getting death threats and horses' heads sent to you, then it means that you've touched somebody on an emotional level.
Exactly.
So silver lining. I mean, there's something I was going to say there, but it's gone completely out of my head there, so 50 other things just appeared. Yeah, characters, that was it. So, yeah, when a character kind of breaks through the boundaries that you already had set in place, it must feel like a very weird experience for you as the creator, just going, well, actually, I can expand this out and further out and further out and further out, and then the next thing you know, you've sailed over the horizon and you've got something completely uncharted happening.
Yes, that's exactly what happens. In my case, by the time my characters start, as I put it, making their own decisions, they are well fleshed out enough that I kind of trust them. Mm-hmm. I go where they lead me, and I trust that it is going to work out, because I'm not a plotter at all. I'm trying to be a little bit more disciplined, but I'm basically a pantser. So if my characters are saying, actually, no, we need to do this, it's got to the point now where, you know, I've written, I'm currently drafting my 10th novel, that, you know, I trust them and I trust myself enough to go where they lead me, and it will work out in the end. I might not know how, and it might take me, as it did with my current trilogy, the Songs of the Drowned trilogy. I was actually on the structural edit of the third book, so we're talking like about 3 months ago, and the book is due out in December, where I realised how it all ended. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, talk about cutting it fine. Yeah, a little bit. All of a sudden, a character went, but what if this happened? And I was like, oh, thank God for that, because I had no idea where this was going. And yeah, and hopefully I've written a really satisfying conclusion with a twist that nobody saw coming, because I did not see it coming. I did not plan that twist. That twist happened all on its own. I don't know where that twist came from. I don't know if the gods sent it, but either that or my subconscious was doing something very sneaky, but hadn't bothered to tell me it was doing so.
I am convinced, beyond all shadow of a doubt, that there is something in the reptile brain that constantly works on stuff in the background that you're not aware of. Mm-hmm. And then eventually that thought is formed slowly. It happens very slowly, and it's just pushed up into the mammalian brain. It's like, there you go. And it's...
This is what you've been looking for the last 2.5 years and quarter of a million words. Yes, it is. Thank you very much. And it appears almost fully formed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that weird organic structure.
And you're like, wow.
Honest, there'll be some weird German word for it that I can't pronounce.
Yeah, there will be.
Kneischenschnoffen or something. Oh, that... Naughty, Adam. Naughty. Don't make up German words whilst we're recording. Get yourself into trouble. Yeah, no, it's fascinating listening to somebody talk about... One of my great loves and passions in life is listening to creative people talk about being creative. I think everyone's got a different story to tell. Everyone comes at it with a completely different angle, and I think it's wonderful to hear how people get the ball rolling and how these things slot into place over time, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've got author friends who are meticulous planners, and you know, like I think it's Dave Ragg, who's the author of Articles of Faith and Tales of the Plains, and he was saying that he's now ready to start drafting book 3 of Tales of the Plains because he's got his 50,000 word outline for it. And I'm like, that's half the book, mate. What are you talking about? Why? Why do you need all of that? Just start. Just see where it takes you.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't write the way he writes. He couldn't write the way I write.
No.
And it's fascinating to me that we can both come out with what is clearly a fantasy novel, regardless of all the bells and whistles, the trappings that make it 2 separate books. Mm-hmm. We have both produced something that is not of this world.
Yeah.
And we have created all of these people who are not of this world. And we have had to do it in 2 such fundamentally different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I just think, and just whenever he talks about it, I just sit there like with this horrible grimace on my face, like, what are you talking about? That's horrible. And he just looks like he's in pain when I talk about pantsing. It's like, how can you not know where you're going? I'm like, well, that's half the fun.
I agree. I'm the same as you. I'm definitely a pantser. I fly. Well, I say fly. I glide by the seat of my pants because to fly gives you the idea that I've got some kind of control over where we're going.
You fall by the seat of your pants.
I plummet by the
parachute. You're just drifting gently downwards by the seat of your pants.
Drifting, holding pants, travelling through the pants. Travelling through the different
trousers of time.
Yeah, that's where I was going. So where do we end up? I remember years ago, we used to produce another podcast where the guy who ran it, he would get people on, and each week it would be a completely different concept for the show. So one week it would be all about music. He wanted to know about music that people listened to that wasn't anything, like it was completely original. He wanted to find out how many truly original pieces of music there were out in the world. And so he got people. It was amazing. Absolutely. Really, really good show. It was called The Happy Hour. And the show was limited to an hour, and he would try to get as much as he could on that subject in an hour. It was great stuff. And one of them was he wanted to get people who were phoning in to write a short piece of fiction or a poem. They had to start at the beginning of the show and then read it out at the end, right?
Okay.
So you had 25 minutes to 35 minutes to write something in, right?
Yep.
So it's brilliant, right? Well, I'm going to take part in that because that sounds like a fun thing. And it started off being, it was meant to be the story of somebody who was experiencing extreme loneliness and isolation. Right. And it became somebody who was surviving a entropic apocalypse where everything, like the very rules of reality, were collapsing in on themselves. And he was racing away from shopping bags that had become like seagulls and flapping after him to try and cover his face. And cutlery mice tinkling away in the drawers. And I remember reading it, and the Tricky just goes, "I'll never sleep again." It's like, it's like, oh no.
I'm so sorry. This is just what my brain does. I have no control over it.
It was meant to be a page long, and it was a little story about someone experiencing isolation, and it just went mad. It was like, so pantsing is absolutely my way of doing anything.
It's a valid lifestyle choice.
Absolutely. And as I work as a mental health crisis coordinator, I can't plan for a lot of stuff. So it has to be reactive. So it's kind of like just been my entire life. It's just, and go.
Yeah. Action. What?
Right. So there's something I do have to get into, because if I don't, people will find me and burn me at the stake. Gothgul Hollow.
Gothgul Hollow.
There are 2 things I need to know. Right?
Okay.
Number 1, the big reveal at the end.
Yeah.
We'll get into the spoilers in a minute. Was that something that you came up with, or was that something that was passed to you?
They wanted that to happen.
Okay.
So we had to engineer a way of making that reveal have as much impact as possible, which is why the sort of the last line is the revelation of the identity.
Mm-hmm.
Trying really hard not to spoil anything.
Yeah, I think we want to get into the spoilers here. So, Gothgul Hollow is 3/4 of a incredibly atmospheric, beautiful Gothic mystery that is halfway between like Gormenghast and a lot of like Kim Newman's early work, and it is pitch perfect. It's the only way I can describe it. It is pitch perfect. I would have loved that book without the reveal. Okay?
Yeah.
Try my best not to fangirl, I promise. And everything that happens from the Victorian horror of the mystery about the mother, the backstory about the mother, which is like, well, that's a lot of Victorian horror you've obviously read at some point in your life. Like it was Victorian romantic horror. To the more visceral elements, to the sheer agency that a lot of the characters have throughout the story. There is a point in the book where they are along for the ride. Their thoughts, their feelings, their histories are all shaping what's happening between them as a dynamic, and it's a balancing act that's very, very hard to do, and I was just blown away by it. At the end of the book, the final, not even quarter, the final sixth or so, it is revealed that the ghost who has been haunting the place isn't a ghost. It's Genevieve from the old world. And
yes, it is. And
I can honestly say I had an out-of-body experience with that reveal dropped. This is probably the only time I'll ever use the Marvel movies on this show. But in the Marvel movies, I think it was Endgame, where Bruce Banner gets punched by the sorcerer and his body stays still, but his spirit flies out. It felt like that. Because it came as such an unrelenting shock and a incredibly welcome one, as to really sort of cement how much that blew me away. Drakenfels was my first Warhammer novel back in 1980, too long ago. And from there you have Genevieve Undead, Silver Nails, so all of that Kim Newman, and then it goes to the Orfeo trilogy, Conrad, which, yeah, some of those books are really good. The Conrad trilogy is something that I have a lot of love for, but I am well aware it is truly despicably bad. I love it a bit. But it's not a good book. But the Jack Yeovil, Kim Newman writers, Jack Yeovil, and the Ian Watson, and all those, that first salvo of pre-Black Library, pre-Foxtree books are incredible things. So that's what got me into Warhammer. That's what got me into the Grimdark side of things. It got me in. From there, got into horror, got into, as I said, H.P. Lovecraft, for good or for ill. And then, that leads just so many doors open over the years to experience and explore different things. So having that moment of just, holy fucking Christ. I mean, my wife has no interest whatsoever in any of it, but I did turn to her and went, the fuck? And she was just looking at me like, what are you on about? Genevieve? Who? And I put up a Facebook post on the Fluffenhammer Facebook group that was just basically on the lines of, the fucking what? And it took me about 4 days to come down from that high. It was a really weird experience that I don't think I've ever had before, and I definitely haven't had since. And I have to thank you for that, because it was almost like an existential crisis for me of just, why is the world? But
thank you very much. I mean, I have to say, the amount of love that the ending got in the sort of the initial, after the book had first come out, the first sort of couple of months afterwards, it was truly astonishing to just be getting the number of just complete random people on the internet finding me on Twitter or Facebook or something, just to say thank you. I was not anticipating that level. I mean, I knew broadly speaking, I knew what I was doing with that reveal and the return of that character. It was made very clear to me just how beloved Genevieve is. But it was still very much another thing to actually experience it firsthand.
It was intellectually knowing it and emotionally knowing it.
Yeah, and it was a huge privilege, and the fact that my editor at Black Library got in touch with me and said, "This is what we want to do, and we would like you to write it. We think you could do a good job." Was incredibly flattering, but honestly, just the response that it's had from the audience has just been amazing. And it really does make it all worthwhile. And I'd never written a Gothic horror before, and I was so worried that I was going to get it wrong. And this is also the only time that I've ever had an editor say to me, "You need to put more skulls in this." And I was like, I could do that, because it turns out I have a melodramatic streak a mile wide, and I always have to rein it in my own work. I always try and approach my own work in a much more disciplined way. So basically being able to just go ham with skulls and gibbets and dancing skeletons and like blood roses and, bushes that eat you and stuff like that. I was just like, God, this is just my inner melodramatic Victorian heroine is fucking loving this. So it was a great fun to write.
I'm actually surprised you said that it was the first time you'd taken on that Victorian Gothic romance feel, because you nail it. You absolutely nail it to a T. I did have a friend who writes extensively for Black Library, was reading it, and he just sent me a message saying, "So is this couple actually going to fuck on the necromancy table?" And I was like, "This is a Warhammer novel. Of course they're not. But yeah, definitely." Just not on the page. I firmly believe that there was some weird, wild skull sex happening when nobody was watching. So, yeah. That's. But we'll leave what that actually is up to people's imaginations.
Of course.
But it's. I'm going to put the Genevieve thing up in a little bubble, and it's just going to stay over here, because that is, I know, the thing that everyone kind of cottoned onto, and it was just pitch perfectly done. It was superb. But that rest of that book is so good. It's and it's one of the things that it always worried me when I wrote it's actually weird. I wrote the review that about 3 days afterwards, so I'm starting to come down off the high of that. And then you retweeted the review, and back up on the high again. It was completely unbidden to me, and I'm just sitting there looking at my phone, going. But yeah, the tone of that novel is absolutely incredible, and it's one I've probably read now about 5 or 6 times. and I'd be hesitant to think of any outside of maybe Loon Curse and The Infinite and the Divine that I've read more than once or twice since its release.
Goodness.
It's up there with try not to fangirl, Adam. Stop fangirling.
Keep going, Adam.
That's less fangirling and more beaky from the Muppets, I think. But it's up there with the top level of Black Library, of what Black Library can and can't do, and I think it's an absolutely stunning book. And one of the things I remember writing in the review of it was there is a real sense of Kim Newman here without plagiarizing, without repeating any of Kim Newman's. It's all in the feel. It's all in the tone and the sense, which I don't know if you were a big fan of Kim Newman beforehand, or if you're just both coming at it from the same kind of mindscape. It was just this wonderful throwback.
So I read I read a lot of the classics. So I read Frankenstein and I read Dracula, all stuff like that. When I was fairly young, and I've sort of read them multiple times. But also things like Brave New World by Aldous Huxley.
Yep.
Just for the sheer sort of terror of being alive and the manipulations of the world around you, and how we're all just kind of hamsters on the wheel of life kind of thing. But when it came to writing Gothgul Hollow, I didn't want to take too much inspiration. So I did read. I read Drachenfels and Silver Nails, and then I cut it off at that, and I was because I didn't want my Genevieve to be someone else's Genevieve. I wanted her to be mine.
Absolutely.
And so particularly when in the last sort of fifth of the book, when she physically manifests. She's not the other things that she has been through the rest of the book. When she physically manifests, I wanted her to be as otherworldly as possible. Because of where she has been for the last however many millennia.
Couple of millennia or two. So I just wanted. It hasn't worked with everyone. I know that there are some Goodreads reviews out there that say this is not shyish. There's no way this is a shyish book. This doesn't feel like shyish. It doesn't look like shyish. And I'm like, well, okay. Like I said, I didn't delve particularly deeply because I wanted to make it. I was given the brief Gothic horror, and I was like, cool. The sky's purple, the plants are purple or black or grey or blood red or whatever. I can work with this. I can work with this colour palette, and but if that's not what you think shyish looks like, okay, there's nothing I can do about that. I'm not going to please everyone. No. I will say that the people who leave those reviews, there is a trebuchet that I have in my back garden, which I will happily put them into because they're wrong. But it's a strange one, isn't it? I think you're absolutely correct. You can't please everyone. You can't try to please everyone. All you can do is make something that you yourself are happy with in order to get it done. Because if you don't do that, it'll never finish. It'll never end. Of course. Go to the treadmill constantly and end up just wearing yourself down. But as far as I'm concerned, that is a really good representation of what it's like to live in what is basically a physical afterlife. And there's a lot going on. I could very easily, I'm being careful not to, I could very easily just go in through chapter by chapter of all the stuff that's memorized in my brain of that book and explain in great detail, oh, what about this bit and this bit? But I digress. I shall not. But one of the things that I was really interested in was there's a there's a sense of despondency that is quite prevalent through the book, from the relationship between the general and his daughter, to this, shall we say, the most beautifully struck Victorian love affair between a man, a woman, that veers somewhat into poking fun at the tropes, but never going all the way. Which, well, there's a couple of bits in there, as you were saying earlier, about your friend saying, "Do they then fuck on the necromancy table?" There were more than once. It's like, at some point in time, someone is just going to explode with sexual tension, and this being the Warhammer universe, that could be a physical thing that happens. And if something doesn't happen, it might actually end up being the reader. I don't know. It's a man dead due to sexual tension found in Warhammer book. And there's a lot of those, I don't want to say tropes because that's the wrong word, but there's a lot of these emotions that go throughout the book, which are stunning, is the only word I can use. Is that one of those things where when you start writing it, you have a concept of where you want it to go? Or is it like we were talking about earlier, you had the characters and then they just started having sexual tension amongst themselves?
It was very much the latter.
Yeah.
It was very much the latter. It was not something that I had planned on. I think in the back of my head, the fact that there was the father and his friend who was also quite elderly, and then they were, and then the daughter and the hunter were sort of the only two of a kind of a comparable age. Mm-hmm. But what I did want to play around with, that was quite a conscious choice, was the idea of, they are, as you said, they are in a physical afterlife. They are the living among the living dead. Yeah. And to me, I thought of the dead as kind of having a sort of a lessening of emotion. So like they like you can still go and have a cup of tea with your great auntie or whatever. And, but they probably don't have a lot of new stuff to talk about. They're dead. Yeah. But so I wanted like a real obvious contradiction in emotion between the living and the living. Right. So that was why. So for Edria, the daughter, she's not a particularly pleasant character all the way through, and she's not supposed to be. No. She's got a huge amount of repressed anger against her father. She's been stuck in this little town her whole life. She's got talents that she's not allowed to use. She's constantly underestimated, undermined, belittled, told she can't do what she can actually do. And all of that leads to a very complicated and prickly and dangerously powerful young woman. But then, Runar comes along and he doesn't underestimate her, and he doesn't not trust her to look after herself and to look after him. And, he's like, you can do that? Brilliant. We are going to need that because we are outmanned and outgunned and outclawed and everything.
Outflanked.
And so he doesn't just accept her for who she is, but he relishes her abilities. Mm-hmm. And as soon as that happened, I was like, oh boy, yep. Okay, these two are going to bone.
Probably not the correct term to use for living in Shyish.
Not on Shyish. Apologies to the dead. Is this your leg?
It's very rare that a joke comes to mind where I have to go, nope.
No, not this time.
No, I will tell that to myself in private later on, where nobody will judge me for it. I'm aware that we're kind of coming up to time here, so I'll just quickly blow through a couple of other things I really wanted to get into. Not about Gothgul Hollow, you'll be pleased to know, because I can talk for hours on that, and have done, and people wish me to stop. But I know you've done a couple of bits and bobs here and there now. Have you got any other Black Library work upcoming? Because one of the... I'll be honest, the second book in the series not being done by you was a bit disheartening. And I love C.L. Werner, but it was, oh.
I mean that was obviously that is a choice made by the publishers.
Of course, yeah.
If it had been up to me, I would have loved to do the whole series, but there we are. There is something that I am sort of in tentative contract negotiations with at the moment, but because we haven't even signed paperwork, I can't really talk about it. My editor has mentioned that they would like me to look at a revamp of an existing part of Age of Sigmar, I think it is. But again, I don't think it's been announced yet, so can't really say anymore. I mean, I would quite like. I did a novella in the Covens of Blood at the Daughters of Cain. I would quite like to revisit that witch elf, actually, Trisethne. I was quite taken with her. I quite liked her. It's really hard to write a sympathetic, mass murdering, homicidal maniac. So I appreciated the amount of effort that I had to put into that story, because I really had to work hard, because I hated her at the start and I was supposed to quite like her. So from a craft perspective, that was really interesting to write. But yeah, I mean, if I could revisit those characters again from Gothgul Hollow, I would in an absolute heartbeat. But they belong to others now. It's
a funny thing, actually, with there being Warhammer Horror and Warhammer Crime. Me and George and Andy have said multiple times we want to see Warhammer Romance. We want to see the Mills and Boone style Warhammer, and it's just occurred to me. I think I've just found the first way of doing it. It's these two just off they go, and they can stare longingly at each other as they ride horses. As in, and they ride on horses.
They could also fight crime at the same time.
Absolutely, yeah. You could merge all three of them into one big hot sweaty
Warhammer
mess.
mashup.
I want that now. I desperately want that. A couple of years ago now, there was a announcement there was going to be a series called Hammer and Bolter, and we thought, it's like, Hammer and Bolter, Mills and Boone, there we go, we're going to get it. But it was an anthology book, so we were very crushed and disappointed. Desperately want that. Because so far, no one's done a romantic book in Warhammer, and I desperately want to see it. So. So I think what we'll do, we'll start pulling things together now, because I'm aware that we are now well over time, which I apologise for. I knew it was going to happen. I'm sorry. Is there anything that you'd like to announce, or anything that you'd like to tell people to go to see, and or websites that they need to go and get super glued to, or else I'll come around and hit them with a spade?
Okay, well, I mean, my social media, so my website is anna-stevens.com, Stevens with a PH. I am sort of still on Twitter, but I don't actually go on Twitter anymore. I'm mostly on Blue Sky now. If you're on Blue Sky, just search for me on there. Instagram, Facebook. I actually run a world building course for science fiction and fantasy writers. You can find the writing course page on my website. I do an 8-week course with video content and workbooks, and depending on which tier you sign up for, you get sort of weekly phone calls and feedback from me and stuff like that. Which has proved quite popular so far.
That's really cool.
Yeah, if you wanna work on your world building, then check it out.
Do you have any course on telling you how to stop world building? Because that's the one I need.
I think there is actually a section in there which is, okay, you've done enough. Stop world building, start drafting.
I know that I'm currently writing a skirmish game, and the point where I got to Celtic Hedgehog Barbarians, I started thinking, have I gone too far? And the answer is no, because now they ride giant chickens. So as far as I'm concerned, that's a win.
There's always further you can go.
Yeah, exactly.
But, that just pushes back the final stage.
Yeah, it does. That's the point I haven't got to yet. It's taking these concepts and actually doing something more than a short story with them. Maybe one day. So yeah, with all that being said, then thank you, Anna, because it has been an absolute pleasure, and I am well aware that we could have talked for another hour or so here about the sexual tension between characters in Warhammer and bushes that eat you. Those two things are not connected, and
apart from when
they are, of course, as all things must be in this giant spider web of reality that we all dwell in. All things are connected unless they're not. That was far too existential for this time of night.
It was, for an off-the-cuff comment, it was pretty damn good, though.
Just be thankful you don't work in an office with me. People get sick of my bullshit very quickly. But thank you, Anna. It has been an absolute pleasure this evening, and hopefully we can get you back on at some point down the line, and maybe zero in on a topic and just get into something. I feel that would be a ton of fun.
Yeah, and thank you very much. It has been a blast. Thoroughly enjoyed myself. I have thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. And of course, for everyone you at home, you can find us at the Fluffenhammer on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on that site that used to be called Twitter, but yeah, it's there. You can find us on Blue Sky. You can find us on Threads. We have a Discord. You can find the links below. Come join the Discord. Come join the Facebook. Come and join us wherever you may be, because we're just lovely, honest governor, not going to do anything horrible to your dogs. Thank you very much for listening, if indeed you still are. Good night.